Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third session or the workshop, Insurers Solvency Valuation, a very important and vital subjects for insurers and reinsurers. Again, we are lucky to have three speakers actually. Mr. Rana Badawi, Chief Actuary of AXA Egypt, Mr. Marius Agrio, Head of Risk Management and Actuarial, Trustee. Third, Ms. Rita Antonius, Senior Underwriter, Medical Actuary in the Life and Health Department, Arab Re. I hand over the floor to Mr. Argio, who will, be a moderator for this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. First, I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation. And it was at short notice, but we really enjoyed the session so far. And my colleagues here, Rita and Rana. So just to say a few things about the logistics of the session, we're going to have three very short presentations. The good news is that there are going to be no models, nothing technical. It's all going to be about challenges, experiences, lessons learned from what's happened before and after implementation of new regimes. And then there's going to be some discussion. Hopefully you'll participate. And just to say just a few things about this solvency regime aspect. It started in Europe about 2002-03, and it took about 15 years for the Europeans to come up with something that it looks quite robust for going from Solvency I regime into a Solvency II. I understand in the region, and there are going to be some aspect in some regimes, but my personal view is that it's a matter of time, risk-based regime to be implemented into the region. It's actually happening now as we speak in the US, Japan, Bermuda, Australia, similar type regime, China. In Malaysia, I think they're actually looking at it now. So I'm going to start with some lessons learned and some changing behaviors from that regime through a presentation. And then we will follow through the discussion. Please. I just have 10 slides, by the way. It's going to be really quick. So we're going to cover three areas today. One is why one-size-fits-all Solvency I regime doesn't make much sense given the challenges, risk drivers that we have today in the industry. The second area is going to be about what we have learned so far from living with Solvency II from a European perspective. Rita and Rana, they are going to give us some more insight about their own markets and the region on those challenges. And number three, there are various views actually on these regimes. So I'm going to see what are those views. Now, first, let me start with this drawing. This came from a colleague in London several years ago. We have been working about an uncertainty framework. It has actually been published, and that was as part of a working group in the Institute of Actuaries in the UK. Now, this is how it looks the world from board or management perspective, where they need to do a number of decisions. If you see there is a rock where there are some underwriters try to climb that rock of exposure, And in the entrance of that rock, there is a pricing engine. If you look on the right, next to the road, there are the process changes and some controls in place. And if we move to the left, there is a person there who, he doesn't look very happy. It's actually an actuary, and he's in his lack of knowledge cave, just outside the zone of expert opinion. And he's trying to figure out how he's going to advise the management. On the background, you can see several external factors. It's reserving cycle, external influences. These days we have in cyber risk. It's not reflected there, but it is something going on. And the importance of this drawing is that insurers, when they operate, they need to have in mind and actually understand the risk and the risk drivers. And the solvency regime itself has to be able to capture those elements. Now, I'm going to mention a few things on some lessons learned from past failure and near misses. I just have two examples, which are quite similar in a sense in terms of principle. The first one, the Financial Services Authority in the UK, which is today known as Bank of England, they have done a report in 2002, and they have examined in quite detail, with access to quite, very confidential information, why companies getting into trouble, or which might lead to policyholder harm. The root cause, it was usually the management and governance, but there are also the interaction between a number of other areas. For example, the operating risk with the underwriting or the correlation of asset and underwriting. Now, in practice, what was happening is that because of some internal processes that could lead to some inappropriate decisions, things could get even worse if it was not in place any risk management or risk controls. And eventually, we had a number of situations where policyholders probably were at risk. Just very recently, a few months ago, the European regulator published a report about near misses in insurance. It's actually published in the website, this report. I'm just going to mention two key messages from there. One is the most common early identification signal is when there is a deterioration of capital strength or low solvency margin, which is quite relevant to today's discussion. And there is also three key risks. They are reserve risk, market, asset liability, and fraud, which has been reported as the most frequently cause of a failure or near miss. Now, just for information purposes, the top 5 primary causes include also governance, controls, underwriting, and economic cycle, which is actually in line with the work that was done by FSA about 15 years ago. The message there is that the supervisors or any change in regulatory regime, it needs to take those into account and to see to what extent can minimize those things. And sometimes these require changing mindsets, looking in, having a forward-looking view, a more holistic approach on management of the company and its risk. Now, solvency regime, I'm going to be quick here because Rita Rana will cover this. How was the life before Solvency II? I would say was probably too simple in terms of how it was managed. It was probably too much work, but I think there is a wider or probably global agreement that the existing regime, known as Solvency I, could capture the risk drivers and the underlying risk and changing business profiles of the companies. In Solvency II world, things are not necessarily perfect, but it's actually a game changer. We're moving towards a risk-based regime. There is a more scientific way of calculating the capital requirements. There is the concept of market consistent valuations. And very importantly, it encourages effective risk management. It actually requires early board involvement and actually board sign-off, so the corporate governance is substantially improved. And this happens through various ways. For example, the ORSA, which is Own Risk and Solvency Assessment, which I will speak about it later. Now, just for information, there have been a number of impacts which are affected the implementation of Solvency II. That was the falling interest rate, it was the European crisis, Brexit, and actually, as we speak today, the European regulator, they are discussing a number of reviews at the end of this year, followed by some more reviews in about 2 years' time. And as you see from the arrow there, the journey is very long. Now, in the next few slides, I'm just going to show you a few examples of the impact on the companies from capital perspective and investment, actually, and something on products. Now, first one. 2016 was the year of the official implementation of Solvency I. In the period before 2016, especially the 5-6 years before that, there have been a number of surveys. These are known as quantitative impact studies, which are actually tested the implication of the new regime on the insurers. What is known as the fifth quantitative impact study, where they participated about, I think it was more than 2,500 companies. Most of them, or the majority of them, were actually small companies. They had a shock, really, in terms of their solvency results. Actually, on average, 310% decreased to around 165. That was like a wake-up call for many companies to start looking on ways to improve their balance sheets, capitalizations, and marketing strategies. After the implementation, in 2016-17, what's happened in Europe, we have seen that a very strong solvency ratio were actually in place. Now, that was good news because the company, they appeared to be very solvent, but on the other hand, it was too much capital that they needed to keep, and that actually had some negative impact on underwriting or product development. Some companies actually opted the route to go for what is called as internal stochastic model. This is actually moving away from something that is standard into something that representing more their risk profile. The companies that they actually did that, they benefited from about 20% reduction in their capital requirements. Okay, these are the black bars that you see there compared to the top ones. It's about 20% reduction across Europe. And as mentioned earlier, there are still, as we speak, 3 key concerns among the Europeans from the implementation of Solvency II regime. The first one is whether liabilities are exaggerated. There is some concern that this is the case, especially for long-term investors like life companies. One reason is the way that the discount rates are applied, which is near to zero. The second concern is the solvency capital requirements might be excessive. The key concern from EIOPA is actually companies to have sufficient capital, but not necessarily excessive. And the third one is artificial volatility. Now, just to give you an example, the Solvency II in general is calibrated through 1 year. And when you are a life company and you have longer term horizon, if you accommodate short-term volatility, you might be forced to sell assets when your liability is actually longer. and at the same time, that volatility increases the capital requirement. So this is one of the serious discussions that is taking place in EIOPA now as we speak. Now, on investments, I will just show you briefly some changing behaviors on that one. There has been a study about in 2017, it's called EIOPA Investment Behavior Report. And they look in the 5 years before the implementation and the year after the implementation, how companies change on behavioral investments. Now, just looking in that chart, it looks like nothing much change, except perhaps the equity. This, if you see the 2016, it stayed the same, and the bonds actually decreased towards other investment. I will just show you how it looks one by one. This is the bond portfolio. If you see, for example, the gray lines on the left, from bottom to top, the gray line is getting smaller and smaller. This is because bonds are moving away from highly rated quality bonds towards lower quality bonds, which is the yellow bars, which is actually increasing. This was actually because of the search for yield from many insurers, and it was a feature of in 2016, in the year after the implementation. On the equity side, there was a shift from listed equities towards non-listed, and within the listed equity, which is the small chart on the right, it was an increase towards advanced economies. In terms of the other investment, there was an increase in loans excluding mortgages, and a slight reduction in properties. Properties actually cost a lot in terms of capital under a Solvency II regime. Okay, so at a very high level, this was some immediate changes in the asset strategy of the companies the year after the implementation. Now, on reinsurance and capital, this is going to be very quick. I have here several quotes. The 3 of them are from rating agencies. The first one on top is from AM Best. They actually have the view that these capital requirements, which might be quite excessive, force especially the smaller companies to start buying stop loss. They actually, many of them, look at the time on retrospective quota shares or prospective quota shares arrangements. And in general, they were looking for capital relief solutions. I will leave Moody's at the end. If you see the second one on the right, the Fitch actually is of the same view. It's going to be an increasing demand. And the bottom statement is about the larger insurance players. Actually, they increase substantially their product offering, especially on the structured solutions. And if one look the big boys in the insurance industry, you will notice actually a quite increase or sophistication in those structured solutions. Now, the Moody's one. In moving from existing or Solvency I into Solvency II, in order to smooth the transition, they have been given some relaxations on the quality of the equity or the shareholder equity of the companies. And this is in order to, in the years following the implementation, the company not to face any issues on admissibility of their various elements of their asset base. So according to Moody's, this is going to require a 13 billion of new Tier 1 debt by the end of 2026. The reason is 2026 is because the transition was over a 10-year period. So, and this is going to have probably a significant impact in the industry, even in general in the investment. On the business and product side, the examples I have here are coming from the Standard Life Investment Survey, are primarily around life. So what's happened is that longer-term products, like guarantee saving products, appear too costly under Solvency II. Many insurers withdraw actually annuity products. Longevity risk is very harsh under Solvency II. And the last point is that monoline insurers may suffer because of lack of correlation. This is something that they are trying to change now, okay, because it's a big issue. And the last point is about ORSA. Now, ORSA stands for Own Risk and Solvency Assessment. By many people, it's considered the cornerstone of the whole regime. And what is ORSA about is the personal story of each company, how they actually manage the risk, how is the framework for that to happen, what is the capital given those risks, and having a forward-looking view, including a lot of scenario stress testing around it. It's unique for each company, and it needs to be signed up by the board. So the board needs to be involved in the process, and this is one game changer of Solvency II. It actually requires complete change of mindset. It needs to make sense in relation to the business plan, capital, the returns that the company expects. And the quotes that you see below is from the chairman, actually, of EIOPA, so which is why it's considered so important. There was also a survey just recently, and according to that survey, the ORSA actually assist the whole processes to expand. It offers a real value to the company, specifically the decision making. Now, for those of you that are rated companies, you probably have noticed the rating agencies in the recent past, they have amended their methodology. They actually have ERM and governance as an explicit module within the rating assessment, and ORSA, it's fine, almost done. There's one more slide. Yes, okay. Yeah, so it is also reflected in the rating agency review. Now, this is the final slide here. According to a Financial Times article in 2016, most people are fans of Solvency II. They consider it as an example of harmonization, and that is protecting customer value. For the opponents, they think it costs a lot, it's very complex, and it needs to be adjusted. There was actually from Insure Europe, this is the federation representing most insurers and reinsurers in Europe, and 100% of the respondents, they actually consider that it has a positive impact on risk management and governance, on data quality and asset liability management. I will just mention the first three. However, there have been some unintended consequences. About 60% of the respondents, they said Solvency II contributed to negative impact on guaranteeing business. This is what I mentioned before. The life insurance industry actually suffer more compared to the non-life industry. That's why then they said we invested less than optimal in real economy because of the excessive capital requirements. There is also a view from UK perspective, especially from the life insurance industry. And the view is that the Solvency II actually had a positive impact, even though it didn't meet all the objectives. And there are 4 objectives actually in Solvency II. The consumer protection, effective risk management, those 2 are met. And according to UK life companies, the harmonization and financial market stability are still to be met. Nevertheless, the positive impact is there, at least from the industry, and we are waiting to see what are going to be the new changes that are coming up earlier this year. Okay, thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to thank the Fair Committee for the opportunity to share the presentation. For sharing the presentation related to the Middle East and North Africa's inevitable change towards a risk-based solvency, which is under the umbrella of our motor insurers solvency valuation. So, as Marcus has said, the Solvency I concept has been updated and changed to a modern regulatory framework due to its very basic terms of risk assessment. So this framework is Solvency II, which I like to call a realistic risk assessment, aiming to attain a 99.5 confidence that the company will meet the policyholder's obligations and will not be in bankruptcy for the next couple of years. So let us recap on the benefits and the challenges faced mostly in the Middle East and North African region before we move to the implementation and where do we stand from the solvency, risk-based solvency in the MENA region. First of all, I would like to take a look at the table of contents, which are basically the Solvency II benefits, the challenges faced in the MENA region. I have a small capacity assessment exercise to show the need to check the solvency of the companies. I would like to end the presentation by the Middle East implementation and where do they stand from the risk-based solvency approach. So, why companies are basically are looking forward to apply Solvency II, and what are the benefits? What the Solvency II launches, basically, is the market consistent valuation of assets and liabilities, an enhanced quality of capital, it launches a risk-based capital requirement, which mainly depends on the minimum capital requirement, a solvency capital requirement, which I like to call the economic capital, which assesses the risks and computes the risks of the company. And most of the rating agencies are applying this approach in order to rate its customers. Improved governance and risk management, which basically increases the confidence in the insurance markets and allows insurance companies to assess their risks efficiently. It also launches, it strengthens the market disciplines, and it becomes more transparent for the investors, for the insurers, for the intermediaries. In order to sum up, Solvency II benefits' main aim is to avoid bankruptcy and to protect the policyholders' rights and obligations. However, what are the challenges faced in our region nowadays? The first barrier is the high level of competition. The high level of competition basically involves the need to provide the market with low rates, noting that in some markets they have compulsory insurance with fixed premiums, with fixed ceiling of premiums. For example, in Jordan, they faced a loss around 140 million Jordanian in the last 10 years due to fixed tariffs basically applied on motor insurance. So the high level of competition, it affects basically where do we stand from the market's profitability. Second, we have the political instability. most of the insurance companies are basically investing in government bonds. So the political instability, the lack of a strong regulatory regime may impact also insurance companies and their profit. We have also the operational challenges, which I consider one of the main challenges that Solvency II faces. One of the operational challenges that I would like to discuss is the lack of risk expertise. Also, we have some small insurance companies that do not have risk management departments to better assess their risks. And also, one of the operational challenges is the IT. The technology of the IT should be updated in the companies to be able to monitor the data, to be able to perform certain risk assessments like internal models. Also, we have increasing reinsurance prices. At this point, I'd like to discuss also the dependency of insurance companies on the reinsurance companies, especially in the MENA region. So it's going to be affected. We have the low credit environment, basically, in order to cater for the low technical results. So insurance companies are investing in high credit risk exposure in order to get high returns. Also, we have the cost of compliance. The cost of applying Solvency II in insurance companies is costly. For example, one of the largest insurance companies in the UK, they invested around 200 million GBP in solvency, and basically 65% of its investment is related to technological and IT updates. So, I have a small capacity assessment to show the need that insurance companies effectively need to study their solvency. So in order to meet its obligations, insurance companies must remain financially solvent. By financially solvent, I mean it that the company should have basically assets greater than its liabilities. So in this balance sheet, we can see the assets and liabilities of the company. Most we have the assets that can be easily converted to cash, the receivables, from customers and the insurers, and we have the assets also, financial assets, shares, bonds, property. And in the liability section, we have the premium and claims provisions, the risk margin, the loss reserves, the unearned premium. And the difference between these two is the equity or the own fund, which I would like to more or less call the company's profit. So the capacity ratio is one of the ratios that assesses the capacity of the company to write new business. So from this table, it's the Middle East and North African insurance companies ranked by premium written. It's taken from Al Bayan magazine for 2016. We can see that we have some companies, I took sample companies, that have the shareholders' equity greater than the written premium, and we have companies that have the written premium greater than the shareholders' equity. I just wanted to know that the capacity ratio is basically the written premium divided by the shareholders' equity. So when we have a shareholders' equity higher than the premium, we can kind of deduce that the company is more or less solvent and can take risks and invest. And we have also companies in which the written premium are lower than are higher than the shareholders' equity. This means that the premium that the company is investing and has risks. So here it is worth noting that we can do a certain solvency assessment to ensure that the company can afford the obligations of the policyholder. So how much risk does the insurance want to be exposed to? This is a question. So Solvency II, one of the importance of the Solvency II regimes, they stated that to have a more or less solvent company, the economic profit should be between 18% and 40% of the return on equity. The growth between each year should be from 2% to 7% out of the total volume. The solvency margin of the company should be greater than 115% of the solvency capital requirement. So now we move to the Middle East, Northern Africa's implementation. We move to our region, whereby the insurance is still in its niche or its early stages due to the low penetration and due to the low density compared to the mature markets. So we have in each company, country and each government has its own risk assessment. So no company has the same, more or less so far, risk assessment. So this creates a small gap between the countries. So some are using a fixed capital requirement, which basically is equal to the Solvency I concept, which is a percentage of the premium and of the reserve. And others are starting to apply awareness, whereby they are taking into consideration certain risks, as Marius has stated before, that enables them to have a higher capital and have more profitability. So let us move to one of the companies that are basically applying the concept of risk-based capital, and they are evolving. One of them is UAE, and the UAE Minister of Economy and Chairman of the Insurance Authority stated that the issuance of such financial regulations puts the UAE at the forefront of the Middle East with regard to adopting the latest solvency requirements similar to the European model. This shows that UAE is one of the countries, like Saudi Arabia, who is trying to apply the Solvency II requirements in its system. However, while applying the financial regulations, they are increasing their finances, they are increasing their investment, they are working on their data monitoring, they are working on their internal models in order to have more transparency and to better assess their risks. And the period allowed to apply these systems is from 1 to 3 years. So the regulations are basically involved around investing right, around applying certain solvency margin, applying a minimum capital requirement. For insurance companies, they apply 100 million AED, and for reinsurance companies, the minimum capital requirement is 200 million AED. They work on organizing the data. However, the government also have added a ceiling to the issuance of bonds and securities. And also they apply a minimum guaranteed fund, which should be greater or equal to 1/3 of the solvency capital requirement. However, some of the challenges faced is the underwriting capital, which is high for some companies, especially small companies, and also the low retention. It's disallowed. So also they seek to provide, the companies should seek to provide actuarial valuation reports in order to better assess their risks. So another type is the capital-based regulations based on a flat capital, which is applied in Lebanon, Oman, Egypt. I have here a small quote from the acting head of Insurance Commission Control in Lebanon. So the ICC also completed 2 major projects with the World Bank experts, covering the framework for the motor, third-party liability insurance, and the risk-based capital models. So in Lebanon, for example, they have a minimum capital requirement for insurance and reinsurance companies, which is $1.5 million, and a solvency margin of 10%, which is applied to all insurance companies. However, the government is seeking to apply a new draft law, which is under study at the moment. So as we can see, we have certain awareness on Solvency II, but again, the question, the challenges that we face. For example, let us take also a quote from Oman. So I took a sample of quotes for each company, for each country. I think increasing the minimum paid-up capital will give more incentives to those branches to contribute more to our local market and develop their business. So in Oman, basically, they are aiming to increase or double the capital in order to increase the retention, in order to increase the investment, in order to increase the merging of small companies, and to increase the transparency. However, we have also Yemen. The Yemen country has no regulations so far. Let us take also Qatar and Morocco, for example. Here in this case, I have a quote from the Director General of the FMSAR in Morocco. The insurance industry is moving towards final adoption of the framework by 2021. So Morocco, they are already in the process of adopting a risk-based concept, maybe not that complicated as the Solvency II, but however, there is awareness. So the insurance and reinsurers, they have to put a system of governance that takes into account the nature, the volume, and the complexity of the risks. So their system consists of a risk management system, an internal control, information and data management, with a minimum capital of 50 million dirhams. However, some of the obstacles they are facing is the refusal of some officials to cooperate for reasons of confidentiality and to reduce their equity exposures and hold new government bonds. So, to conclude, the lack of risk management does not help in allocating capital optimally. So the current regulation states that each company has its own risk assessment based on the shareholders' appetite, basically. So applying a new system should be applicable and understandable in order to have a smooth transition from a capital-based to a risk-based. And also the internal tools that should be used and applied to assess the risks should not only be used for governmental purposes. They should be used in order to efficiently assess the risks and to know the appetite of each company and use it into their day-to-day activities. However, the MENA, Middle East and North Africa regulators need to cooperate in order to share their best if you want, bases in the market and their market expertise in order to help even the companies that are working in order to apply this risk-based assessment to follow a smooth transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the committee for granting me the opportunity to share with you some thoughts. Thank you to Marius and Rita for their presentations. Following their presentations, I'll be focusing more on capital optimization strategies, and I will be giving you examples from AXA on how we have achieved that through different strategies. So I'll start off with a background. I think Marius and Rita have already covered some of the things that I'm going to talk about, so I'll go briefly through those, and then I will go through the capital optimization strategies. I start off with a funny story or share with you a nice analogy. So 10 days ago, I have completed my first triathlon. A triathlon is a race where you start off with running, and then cycle, and then at the end you start with swimming, and then you cycle, and then you end with running. As you can see, I'm really happy there by completing my first one. But if you look at the participants, you'll find that they all look somewhat similar, but in the end, you have people who come in the first place, second place, and third place. If you consider their physique as their capital that they have, it depends on how they use it throughout the race. And if they're being smart about it, for instance, if they start walking really fast, they will finish all of their energy in the beginning. However, if they use it throughout the race in a smart way, then eventually this is the difference between the person who comes first, second, and third. I'd like to use this analogy for companies. So you find companies having the same capital requirement, but you still find companies making higher returns on capital than others. And why? It is because they are they're optimizing their capital use and they're being more efficient. So if you want to come first, you need to focus. That's why this topic is important. Okay. On the background, so what is a solvency requirement? It determines the amount of money that you need to put aside for any business that you issue. It determines your return on capital. It affects your solvency ratio, and it basically serves as a cushion for adverse events. Marius already mentioned the difference between Solvency 1 and Solvency 2. I would like to do it in a bit of a graphical way. So if you look at Solvency 1, Solvency 1 is a very accounting-based. We have a balance sheet over there. You have the assets, the liabilities, and the difference between them is the shareholder equity. Your solvency requirement is a formula-based, so it's a formula where you apply a fixed percentage to your reserves and your sum at risk to come with the solvency capital requirements. The available capital, which is your equity, when you divide it by your solvency capital requirement, will give you your solvency ratio. When you move to Solvency 2, it is a bit different because you move to a market consistent approach, where you have your assets being valued based on market consistent approach, same as your liabilities and your equity. When you shop your balance sheet, you come up with another balance sheet, and the difference between those will give you your solvency capital requirement. For AXA, our current solvency capital requirement is 212%. I'm going to talk about three main capital optimization areas. The first one, products. The second, investments, and the third, reinsurance. Risk management is basically the framework within companies operate in to achieve these. The first one, products. Marius already mentioned that, so I'll be specific with AXA experience. We previously had a lot of guaranteed savings products, and they do have a very heavy capital requirement. This is why a long time ago, the company has decided to shift from having a guaranteed business to unit-linked, and we have grown from being at 17% of all our savings premium being unit-linked to 28%, and currently it's around 40 to 50% of our new business is unit-linked. This was one of the ways, again, to move away from guaranteed business. The second point I would like to mention is having a diversified portfolio. So diversification is key, especially if you're talking about Solvency 2, because it does reduce different risks offset each other. This is also why in AXA we tend to go more for the risk business. We have 22% of our revenue coming from protection, 12% from health, and 39% from the P&C. In terms of a third approach where you can decrease your solvency capital requirement is by being diversified in terms of globally. So being focused just in one place, obviously for local players, this won't be very easy to do. However, they can do it by having different businesses, different governorates in the country. For AXA, again, in terms of geographical distribution, you can see we're again aiming to have a balanced income from underlying earnings instead of being just focused on Europe. And the main reason for that is, again, being diversified. The second point I wanted to mention is on investments. One of the drawbacks that hasn't been mentioned previously is in the developing markets, you don't have a lot of instruments that you can use to hedge against the risk. You don't have derivatives, you don't have swaps. So there is locally there is limited opportunities to diversify your portfolio using such instruments. However, you can still apply the methods of asset liability management, that which is basically you make sure that at the time when the liability arises, you have the money to cover those to cover your liability. The last point I wanted to talk about is reinsurance. So reinsurance under Solvency I is a bit restricted. Number one, because you have a limit to how much you can reduce your capital by because of reinsurance. In Solvency II, this is not the case. Number two, the impact of the solvency the rating of the solvency of the rating of the insurer does not impact your capital requirement. So if you're reinsuring with an A-rated insurer or a C-rated insurer, it does not have any impact in Solvency I. However, in Solvency II, you have to take into consideration counterparty risk, and the higher the rating of your reinsurer, the less your capital requirement can be. So this is again a way where you can actively manage your risk. I'll share with you an example in AXA. For AXA Italy, Belgium, and France, we could have a lot of this reinsurance. Each of the companies were reinsuring themselves. When Solvency II was introduced, they started doing a like an exercise where they acknowledge the diversification benefits of having different entities and different businesses. And what they found is that actually, without any reinsurance, they can still have the same capital requirement. But another need arises, which is they were all exposed to natural catastrophe. Why? Because they're all in the same continent. So instead of having each of them a different reinsurance arrangement, they shifted to having a cat cover. So what this is saying is basically that under Solvency II, reinsurance has become more sophisticated and tailored for the company's how the company is structured. Yeah. That's it. So key takeaways: diversification, whether it's you're talking about products, geographical allocation, asset allocation, diversification is key when it comes to making sure you have a lower capital requirement. I support, like my colleagues, in saying Solvency II allows for a better recognition of risks, which is not very regulated under Solvency I. And because of that, I truly believe that even if you're in a Solvency I environment, this does not mean that you do not create a risk management department or start installing risk management principles within the business. It will not cost you, it will not need to run sophisticated models. You can, but at the same time, you'll be able to understand your risk and manage them much better.
A lot of challenges and different approaches by different companies, especially when it starts the federation stage. Just to start from you that is that just to comment briefly on the capital optimization from non-life perspective. I would expect, for example, if that happens in the GCC or MENA regions, the non-life companies probably they will look into insurance solutions, probably promotional, depending if they want to smooth volatility or reduce their exposure. Also, with information covers like stop loss that are not fully reflected in Solvency II. Even now, as we speak, this is one issue that EIOPA is actually looking at it. I would like to ask on from life perspective, and given the companies are operating within usually I think within one market and their country, what in your opinion is the most effective way to optimize the capital? Is it, for example, investments or products?
I think number one, reinsurance is definitely one thing. But companies have to consider the cost of reinsurance versus cost of capital. So is it better to retain the business? However, they will have cost of capital for that or cede it. So I think reinsurance does play a big role in that. In terms of, so I would say this would be one of the biggest things. The second thing would be the way the companies invest. And also, again, in our region, we don't have that, but in a more sophisticated market, you have hedging instruments where you can cede your interest rate risk with interest, so you can pass them on. And I think investment would be the second way you would have the best capital efficiency.
Okay, thank you. Rita, you actually touched the point of in the region, risk management is not so developed or sophisticated. Now, it seems that one of the positive impact of Solvency II increase on the risk management as well on governance. I mean, how easy do you think it will be if that happens, that change in your country or the region? Is it going to be a big challenge, for example?
Well, yes, of course, it's going to be a challenge in the region here, especially that we do not have, if you want, adequate resources to apply concerning Solvency II. One of the main issues that I believe is of importance is the operational challenges, which basically is the need of, the company is in need of expertise, risk managers, or even to constitute a risk management department in order to set a framework and assess the risk of their company. Second, they have to work on their IT technology in order to be able to extract the reports and monitor the risks. So I believe there are certain challenges in the Middle East. However, we can simplify them if the company can just set a framework and a place to start from, like setting its risks. What do they need to focus on? Do they need to focus on teaching their underwriters how to price efficiently, for example? They can use also the help of the insurers, as Rana has said, from the expertise of the insurers. So there are some challenges. However, it needs time even to apply these changes into a better environment that takes into account the risk of each company.
Okay, from personal experience, I can say that the Pillar 3, especially for Solvency II, is about the reporting. It is indeed a nightmare. It takes hundreds of hours and a lot of hard work to produce all these reports and legal reporting requirements. As far as I know, EIOPA is actually looking at it now. It actually costs a lot of money and resources for the companies to actually cope with that. So, I would like to ask both of you, but is there any less painful way to implement such a regime?
So I think, number one, it's very important for companies to be aware of the way they implement Solvency II has to be commensurate with their size. So if you're a medium-sized company, again, you need to have a full-fledged like team or team doing all of the Solvency II requirements. efficiency is having the buy-in of the organization. A lot of time and effort is wasted because you don't have sufficient collaboration between the different departments in the company, or they just do not understand what it exactly is it. So I think in order to help with quick and efficient implementation, it's definitely important to have the buy-in of top management and have everyone understanding what they're required to do, and this will help in the rollout.
I would like to add to that one of the things that can be done is the help of external resources. So the company can eventually take the help of experienced professionals, especially if it was a small company that doesn't have the huge money to implement an internal model. So they can use the help of external sources also.
In Solvency II terminology, this is known as the proportionality principle, which is based on the size, scale, and complexity. So companies usually they can simplify things in terms of governance or certain aspect of the modeling process, which is it is good. The bad side is that you might not get the consistency across the board, and but this is something they are looking at it. I just wanted to ask, is there anyone here from a regulatory authority? No. X. Okay. That's good. Yeah, that's something from nothing. What do you think about how easy you think is going to be such a change, or the industry is ready for such a big change?
You and I am Adam Mir, Secretary General of FAIR, and I am ex-regulator for Egypt. Historically, since 2014 or 2015, a group of Arab regulators met together to cooperate in qualifying their regional and authorities of insurance to be adapted to the new changes expected from IAIS new requirement and standard as we know. And actually we succeeded to have two of our regional Arab regulators within IAIS executive committee. Executive committee 20 persons representing the whole world, and two of them from Arab areas, and still until now. What I am saying is that yes, we studied, where we know, we try to be prepared, and some initiative to cooperate in experience exchanging, and I know that at least 2 or 3 countries from Gulf are very well prepared, but if you speak about insurance companies, I think we are not ready enough in many terms, especially with capital requirement within our companies, as well as expertise. How many actually we have in the Middle East? So now we need more for that type of knowledge to adopt the new requirement. So according to your question, we are not very well prepared, but we know what's coming. And I think it will take more time than other regions like Europe, even Asia, or United States. This is my.
Okay, that was useful. I will say that in addition to the possible capital constraints that the companies may face, as I mentioned before in the presentation, one of the I would say key areas where the companies may usually find it difficult to cope with is actually the change in mindset in the whole decision-making process and that starts actually from the top, from the board and to the senior management. Some companies I think they do better than others. In insolvency too, and especially when due to the need to have a holistic view of your company. So you need to manage all your risk, your asset liability, you need to match them. At the same time, you need to make informed decisions which actually make sense, can be tested, and they're in line with your capital management, your risk appetite, and looking also from profitability perspective. This is really a key change because the whole process of making a decision is changing from let's do it, it looks good, to it has to make sense and be justified from a capital risk perspective and financial perspective. I'm happy Vasilis is here today because he will have a rate agency representative. From my personal experience, probably you know as well, the rate agencies have amended their rating process the last few years. They have the ERM and governance as part of the assessment officially. The OSA is an official request from the rating agencies. They're actually looking at it. And I don't know, Vasilis, if you could put some more light in that area, how important it is. From GM.
Thank you for giving me the podium again. Yes, we think ERM, first of all, if you look at it from Solvency II, I believe the most important element is your risk and solvency assessment. The second pillar is the one that is there to ensure continuous change and drive for the improvement of the company. We, as a rating agency, consider ERM to be critical. Why? Because you can run a model as sophisticated or otherwise at any given time, and it will tell you only part of the truth. What you need to make sure is that you have the processes and systems in place which ensure the company will continue operating within its limits, whichever they decide these are, risk limits. And they're also aware what they need to do when things go wrong. So for this reason, either you are a regulator or a rating agency, or I would even say, even if you are a shareholder, you want the company to have a strong ERM. And that's what you see. I hope that ERM and its importance in the rating process is not driven something that drives the ERM into the company. I know that's not always the case, but in an ideal world, it should be a drive from the shareholder. Because what do the shareholders want? They want to know that they will make money within their given risk appetite. And they want to know that things will not get out of control. And that's why, very simplistically, that's what the ERM is there to do. Yeah? So, and that's why we like ERM. And if you see in our rating process, ERM is the one that can, as you mentioned, we change the way that we present our rating processes. If you look at it, ERM is the one thing that can really ruin your rating. They can drag it down by 4 notches. So they can take it from a very nice rating to a very not so nice rating. And the reason is, again, it's not because we are straight or we are bad, it's because that's exactly what can happen. See, historical examples, when companies went from flying high to almost bankrupt or even bankrupt, and what was the key thread between them? They had very weak ERM. So, summarizing, yes, it was part of our rating process, it was part of what the regulators want, but I want to believe it's actually something that the shareholders and the people within the company want before everybody else. And we should be just the observers.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? Anyone?
Probably a very naive question, excuse me.
No, it's perfect.
How do you compare the status of insurance industry vis-a-vis the banking industry? They are talking about Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3. Are we different in this sense from them, or the same sort of framework? And and can we benefit from their experience? I mean, can they teach us a little bit, because they are historically much more advanced than insurance in terms of compliance with regulations, and they are more sophisticated. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I will just say personal view. I don't know the details of the Basel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what I can say is that in the insurance industry has one I would say it's probably a unique characteristic that you don't find in any other industry. That's actually the reserves, which I think is probably, from rating perspective, one of the key drivers for companies downgrade. Now, the reserves actually is the largest number in the balance sheet. It needs to be sufficient, and ideally to be some margins there. Now, from the banking industry, there are of course some similarities, and there are lessons to be learned from both sides. I would say the important element is that both banking and insurance industry are dealing with risk. With the banking, they might have more exposures, or relatively more exposures on the credit or asset side, as opposed to the insurers that they have also the liability side. At the end of the day, the crucial element is they actually understand their exposures and have capital sufficient to capture those risk exposure they are undertaking. Another, just thinking loudly now, another probably similarity might be the banks when they're coming to give loans. They actually have pricing models to come up with yes or no, or yes but, or no, or yes if they change, or they meet certain requirements. That's like the underwriting in the insurance industry. They still need to come with the pricing model with loading sections to cover capital expenses and so on. Now, to the extent that those are implemented, it is a question that needs to be answered probably by them. If it was perfectly implemented, there shouldn't be provision for bad debts, for example, in the banking sector. Similarly, in the insurance sector, you wouldn't have to worry about premium provisions or additional provisions to cover the premium adequacy. At the same time, there are the politics, I would say. Even in Solvency II, there have been some sort of political concessions during the years. I remember actually, I think it was 2008 or 9, I was actually in London for an ABI, Association of Business Insurers
conference. And at the time, there were a lot of discussions from Lloyd's about the volatility of the charges on the underwriting risk in order the French get something on the equity side to help the companies that they have exposures there. Now, the thing is that this house is live, this thing will always be there. So the answer is there are lessons to be learned, and it is important in both industries they operate in a way that the capital, at least that covers the risk that they have.
I agree with you. I think I'm not a historian, but I think Basel was created for the solvency framework, and I think the solvency framework and why they were creating it, they were referred a lot to Basel. So there is, when you look at the structure of how Solvency II is structured, there is a lot of similarities between it and Basel. So I do agree. I think Marius went more into detail about the similarities. I said there is, I agree with this, and there are a lot of common things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are listening, we are hearing always about risk-based capital. And are there any norms, are there any percentages? Because even when the World Bank came to Lebanon, we asked them, how do you calculate the risk-based capital? They said, oh, it's very complicated. Do you have any norms? Are there any schedule that you fill and then you see if you are in the right position?
Yeah, let me, I think I can give you some insights on this. In terms of availability of capital models, there are plenty of models available. We have the ratings models, we have Solvency II, we have Zeros in China, we have the US RBC, there are plenty of models available. The important thing is that the companies, whatever they use, to actually understand whether that reflects their exposures. And if it's not the case, to understand why. So if a given model says it will cost me X 20% because I'm exposed to that bot in that country, and I have to suffer that, I have to kill that capital. If they think that profile is different, as long as they understand that, it will help them to manage that. So in terms of risk-based capital, it is a complex model. It needs quite of know-how and sophistication to run those models and understand them. So the fact that, or the effort that is required to understand the models, and it's very importantly to run scenarios or deviations around those models. It will help you establish some sort of risk appetite, which is going to be the basis for the company to operate. What else? The second thing I mention is, as I mentioned in the presentation, many companies move into what is called internal stochastic model. And the reason they move is because whatever standard model they have been using, it wasn't good enough in terms of reflecting their risk profile. So they actually developed their own model specific for their business profile and risk exposures. And they, most of them, they actually experienced some capital reduction just because they managed to develop or reflect better things like geographic correlations. For example, as we saw before, they are operating in different countries, they have even different products. All these things help, but they can be reflected better in your own modeling sense.
I wanted to add, maybe also to simplify it a bit more for, so concept-wise, Solvency I, which is simple, you just have a formula and you have a percentage that you multiply by the sum insured that you multiply by your reserves. When you come to Solvency II, the concept is a bit different. So basically what you try to do is you have different risks. You have operational risks, you have people risk, you have investment risk, and you put a price ticket to each. So when you run a model, when you run the model, it just gives you an amount that reflects the actual risk that you have. The interest rate risk is just quantified. So let's say it's 10 million. And then you have another risk, the operational risk, it's 20 million. And then you have interest rate risk, and it's 100 million. So you sum them together, and this is basically the amount of capital you have to put aside. This is your solvency requirement. There is an additional overlay on that is correlation. The correlation, which is the effect of how different risks correlate together. So for instance, if we're talking about market risk, if there's an interest rate, if there's a market shock, or there was like in 2008, there is a crisis in the market, then you would have a lot of the different market factors are implicated. So when you put them together, they become bigger. But if you have risks like mortality risk and longevity risk, they offset each other. So if you have a business with both, you actually have lower, so 10 plus 20 becomes like, not 30, becomes like 25 because they offset each other. So this is basically how, when we say risk-based, this is basically what risk-based means. I'm not sure if I went into detail, but...
I didn't have any reply to my question.
No?
There is no percentage, you just add and you subtract and you reduce the capital and you increase the capital. I think there should be somewhere a model that we insurance companies could base ourselves to be able to say where we are or where we are not. So I don't know how you do it.
I think the answer is one size doesn't fit all. That's why it cannot be one number. And a minimum number can be say 100%, but the key element is that each company has different policy holders, different profiles, so the number is going to be different by definition. And the beauty of that is that when it comes to decision making, and you have everything working at the same time, if somebody wants to take cash and buy an equity, and if the capital is not enough, he might need, for example, to slow down in the growth strategy, or vice versa.
I can give you two percentages. So I asked internally how, when Solvency II was implemented, how did it affect our retirement business. So they told me we have to actually double our solvency for retirement business, so it's 100% increase. For risk business, there was a reduction, so we had 20%, around 20% decrease in the solvency capital for risk business. But this is very AXA related. So these are the, if you relate to Solvency I, this is how it impacted us. I'm not sure whether this answers your question.
I just want to add something that, as Rana said, some of the countries are also doubling their minimum capital requirement to take into account the risks in the country. So it is not easy to directly move into a risk-based computation because, as Marius have said, it needs internal models and it's based on the risk appetite of each company. So what the insurance companies are doing in certain countries is doubling their solvency minimum capital requirement.
It's like the box and you say abracadabra.
I think facility one, yeah. Some of the
Max, I have the answer to you. It is 100%. Simply put, the old models, because they were very crude, the regulators did not trust them, so they said, you need to have 120, 140. When you have a risk-based capital model, whatever that model says, that's what's your minimum requirement for the regulator. I have not seen many regulators who have risk-based capital models and then they go, and I will put a margin on top. And if they do, it's very little. So don't expect 151. If they go there, it is being extremely conservative. Now, what my colleagues are trying to do to explain there is there are so many models out there that there is not the right answer. And you may decide, the other thing, you may decide, for my own safety, I want to go up at 120. But typically, the regulators play at 100%, and some of them go to up to 120 out of experience of what their risk-based capital model does. So, the answer is, Vasily said, 100%.
Thank you, Vasilis. I think there's one more, yes.
Thank you very much for the information you shared with us. I would like to have a question to you all three, if possible, if not, to anyone who wishes to take. Is there any appetite in the markets you operate in general, or in the company in Europe, or in particular, for the IFRS 17 procedures? Is there any appetite to adopt that or operate that in the future? And do you think would it be any help for a better solvency ratio or a better investors and consumers protection?
If I understood correctly, there is a better operating model to do better on
IFRS 17.
IFRS 17. Okay, IFRS 17. Yeah, okay. The IFRS 17, I don't know quite the details. There can be discussion for years. It used to be, I think, IFRS 4 phase 2 probably, which eventually developed IFRS 17. I know it's going to be a challenge, actually.
It is a challenge.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge for the whole world really, to comply with IFRS 17. IFRS 17 has some similarities with Solvency II. It requires discounted, for example, provisions in relation to reserves. It has some, I think it's called service margin. It has this concept of future cash flows and looking from that perspective, as opposed to what it is now. So our details, I'm not sure, I don't know really what the details were.
So as I don't know the details in terms of having to apply, so for instance, also in AXA Egypt, because AXA Group requires us to be consolidated, we have to comply with IFRS 17, even if in the market it's not necessarily a requirement. And I think this would be similar to other multinationals operating in markets, even in the market that does not apply, and they're reporting the triggers, then they have to comply with IFRS 17.
Is there a celebration? Not fully? Later on.
Not at all. There is no answer to this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I would like to call Mr. Nabil Hajjar and Mr. Adil to hand over to the speakers and moderate. Thank you very much. Token of appreciation.
this was the last session, but let me give a small speech. Dear participants and guests, I would like to thank you all for participation in the second Fair Reinsurance Forum. It is a great honor to spend these 2 days with our friends and guests from 40 countries. We have gathered here for a respectful debate and to listen to different points of views. We have been honored by the presence of eminent speakers from different markets who were kind enough to accept our invitation. During the 2 days forum, we had in-depth discussion and communication on 3 major topics. Apart from the sessions, all the time has been allocated for bilateral meetings. I hope you had a successful meeting. Once again, I would like to thank you for your participation. Look forward to welcome you in the next Fair Conference in September next year in Morocco. My thanks is also extended to our co-organizer, Arab Re Lebanon Company, and his staff, who are the soldiers behind the leadership of Sheikh Khaldoun Barakat and his staff. The soldiers behind the scene who have been working hard to ensure smooth running of this event, headed by Mr. Nader Yunus Arabi. My thanks is extended to our golden sponsors, Shadid Re, and on behalf of FAIR, I would like to give them a symbolic gift as a golden sponsor. Maybe Mr. Habib is here, and Mr. Nabil. Extend our special thanks also to Fair Pools and Syndicate, Reinsurance Pool, Aviation Pool, Fair Oil and Energy Syndicate, and Fair NatCat Reinsurance Pool. And on behalf of our Fair Pools, we would like to give our thanks to Mr. Nabil for his cooperation and support. Special thanks, the very dear friend, to Ms. Also, we extend our thanks to our media sponsors, Middle East Insurance Review, Al-Muraqib Al-Ta'mini, and Ta'min Financial Magazine. And finally, my special thanks to my friend, Mr. Taysir Al-Treki, for his kind cooperation. And please allow me to present to him this symbolic gift. Finally, allow me to invite all of you to the lunch in the main restaurant in the hotel. Thank you again. We'll miss you. Looking forward to seeing you again. Morocco, September, Morocco. Thank you.